Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Last Week in AI, where you can hear us chat about what's going on with AI. And as usual, in this episode, we will summarize and discuss some of last week's most interesting AI news. As always, I do want to mention, beyond the stories we were covering in this episode, there's a bunch more at our text newsletter at lastweekin.ai. I'm one of your hosts, Andrei Kurenkov. I finished my PhD at Stanford last year, and I now work at a generative AI startup. And once again, Jeremy is not able to be here this week. He'll be back next week if people miss him as a co-host. But we have another very cool guest co-host this time, and I'll let you introduce yourself.
I miss Jeremy too, by the way. I listened to last week's episode and it was great. I can't remember what her name was, but she was really good. But I do miss Jeremy as well. You guys are good together. My name is Gavin Purcell. I have been on this show once before. I am one half of the podcast AI for Humans. We are specialized in kind of like a little bit less technical, a little bit more human-centric focus of AI, and we cover all the stuff that, we do cover the big news stories and the tech, but we also kind of do it through a human lens. Our goal is to kind of demystify AI for a lot of people. And Andre, this is a big week for that kind of story. There is a lot of stuff to talk about, so I'm glad you had me on here because I may not be as technical as you and Jeremy, but I think I will have a lot to say about some of the things we're going to talk about.
I know, right? Yeah, and as I mentioned last time you were a guest on this show, I really am a fan of AI for Humans as a podcast. It does something pretty different from what we do and what all these interview podcasts do. There's a lot of examples. I think you play around with a lot of AI tools. You have an AI co-host with different personalities and voices. And you talk about, image generation, making little videos, things like Pi, where, that's a different type of chatbot.
R.I.P. Pi. It's a bummer. That was like our first love. Honestly, Pi was the original Scarlett Johansson. That's what I'd like to call it. Pi was the original very good voice chatbot, and it's not going to be around for much longer.
The original emotionally intelligent.
Exactly.
Not quite as flirty.
Yes. Although my wife would beg to differ. She would hear it. She's like, that Pi sure sounds like she's interested in you.
Yeah, and you know what? Before we dive into this week's news, since last week was pretty big with GPT-4o and Project Astra, no doubt you've covered that in your own pod last week. So real quick, I guess, what were your reactions, especially to GPT-4o?
I mean, Kevin and I talked, obviously it was a big deal. I think the thing that was really interesting, a friend of mine said to me, hey, you guys covered it slightly different than other people in that you really spent time thinking about how this could impact and broaden the appeal of AI to people. And I think that's the thing I took away from it. I know a lot of people heavy in the AI community were like, this announcement sucks. It's not cutting edge enough. It's not GPT-5. It's not doing interesting reasoning stuff. And I think y'all have to remember that we are a small group of people that are really deep in this space. I think if this works as planned, and granted, we all have to be clear, it may or may not. Once we get this thing in our hands, we'll see how good it actually is. But there was another video, Andre, I don't know if you saw this, that came out of a guy I can't remember, I think it was in France. He was doing a demo of multimodal ChatGPT 4o with voice, and he was showing it off, and it seemed to work in real time via the Mac app very well. So my thing is, if we now have a persistent, interruptible, really fast voice assistant, I know this is going to sound like hyperbole, but like it is kind of a fundamental shift in how humanity operates. Meaning that if we have an always on, interesting, smart AI that's always available to us to ask questions or interact with, there's all sorts of positive and negatives. But like once that gets into the hands of like 50 million, 100 million, 500 million people, life may change. And I think that's an important thing for people to take away, because I don't think very few people know what the capabilities of this is yet or are yet. And I think that's going to be a big deal.
Totally agree. Yeah, I think it's still not entirely intuitive to use a chatbot. If you haven't used any of these things before, it might be a little daunting. You may not know exactly what to say because we're used to computer programs where you write stuff in Word.
Yeah.
And if you haven't really dug in, you don't know that you can kind of do anything. In some sense, it's hard to believe its capabilities. But it's with GPT-4o, you're taking it to the next level where I think it's very intuitive to just talk to someone,
Yes.
right, as if they are human. And so I tend to agree. Yeah.
Yeah. My only concern, and I think this is a concern most people hold, is that the hallucination problem will become amplified now. And I think we see this a little bit with what's going on with Google AI search. I don't know if you've seen that today or yesterday. There's been all these people posting pictures of how Google AI search is getting stuff wrong, and sometimes getting stuff wrong in a very bad way. I think that's going to be the next kind of hurdle, and I hope that GPT-5 can find a way to kind of figure that out, because I think that if your hallucinations are too bad, you're not going to get as wide of adoption as possible as you could. So that's my overall take. I think it's as transformative as GPT-4 was if it comes out in the form that it's in. That's what I would say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I will say I think hallucinations are somewhat solvable, and in some sense, I think these issues are due to people kind of racing to release. We've also seen this with Perplexity, where there are techniques you can use to double check the outputs, but it's expensive and it's not exact.
Or with Google, like you're just going to push it live to 1 billion users worldwide and see what happens. You're going to have some edge cases, I assume.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, that's it for discussing last week's news. We'll have some stories that are building on those news, of course, this week. And there's some not quite as exciting stuff this week, but still some interesting and spicy
I would
things.
say, here's what I would say. I've been thinking about this, Andre. It's like last week showed the absolute promise of where AI can go. In some ways, this week shows the hurdles that we're going to have to go past to get there, right? Like, it's almost like a yin and a yang. It's like the news last week felt like, oh my God, we're really moving fast. And then this week it was like, wait a second here. There's a few things to think about before we race to the future. That's my kind of take on it overall.
Mm-hmm. And one more thing before we get into the news, as usual, I do want to call out some feedback we've seen from our listeners. There's a new review on Apple Podcast from M. Lars, where the headline is "Don't change your format," arguing for not going daily, keeping it weekly, and diving more deeply into things beyond what other podcasts do. And that's very much appreciated. We do really enjoy the feedback, and I think that's the plan. I think we also like this Last Week in AI, a roundup. I mean, that's the name of our podcast, so we will keep it as is. Alrighty, well, let's get started with the news. As usual, the first section is tools and apps, and we begin with some news about GPT-4o. So if you've been following some of the big headlines, you've already heard this. There was a bit of controversy with the notion that the demo of their GPT-4o model sounds a lot like Scarlett Johansson. So this kind of got kicked off with Scarlett Johansson actually releasing a statement that revealed that OpenAI contacted her twice asking to basically have her voice for this. And the statement essentially said that she refused, and that she was, let's say, displeased with seeing the voice sound quite a bit like her. There are comparisons out there. It's not exactly the same, but it does sound similar to her, in particular from the movie Her, where she played an intelligent AI assistant, very reminiscent of GPT-4o. And of course, Sam Altman did tweet Her. And this was kind of broadly acknowledged in the conversations. Then, as a follow-up, OpenAI did say that you didn't use Scarlett Johansson's voice. There was another voice actor for this. But they also said that they would not be releasing this particular variant of a voice of GPT-4o. They would pause it until this kind of got geared up. So, yeah, that's an example, as you said, of one of the hurdles where even if you kind of sound similar or sound alike, where it wasn't necessarily breaching any copyright or using any data, still, you're gonna ruffle some feathers.
Yeah, and I think the thing to know about this is obviously anybody who's been in the space knows that this voice was in the voice app, the ChatGPT voice app, since September 2023. And it was, honestly, people thought it sounded like Scarlett Johansson, and I really did think I thought they had made a sound alike kind of on purpose. And what was funny about this is I don't know if you caught this, but like there was a blog post from OpenAI that went out Sunday night. And it was like this kind of like, whoa, why are they putting out a blog post on Sunday night? And I dug into it and it was like, oh, they're actually saying this doesn't sound like Scarlett Johansson directly in the blog post. And it's like, that's weird. And then Kevin and I made a video about it on Monday. And then that whole day was when Scarlett's thing came out. Like, if you read Scarlett's statement, it is pretty significant, right? Like she says, Sam Altman asked me to do it. I denied to do it. And then 2 days before this last one came out, my agent was reached out to, but I didn't talk to them. And then they put it out. I also think that, Scarlett Johansson, this is all maybe gossipy for your audience, but like Scarlett Johansson's husband is Colin Jost, and they told a joke about it on Weekend Update this weekend. So like maybe it bubbled up ahead of time because of all the news that came out last week. It is not her voice, her quote unquote, her voice. Sorry, everybody. But I think that there is something that like this feels like, a self-own on OpenAI's point, right? Like OpenAI, and a lot of people have talked about Sam Altman's hubris, right? One of the other things to be aware of this week, I think we may get into later, is there's been a couple other controversies around OpenAI and the way that Sam Altman has behaved per se. To me, this was solvable. Like, just don't use that voice in your demos. The other voices, I'm sure, are just as good. Or maybe they're not, and they could only focus on one of these demos to make it really good. I don't know, because we haven't seen the other voices in action, really. Actually, that's not true. We have seen one other voice now, or a couple other voices. But anyway, it feels like this is like the tech world not understanding how their technology may be perceived by the larger world. And this was like it was not needed. This was a story that didn't have to happen. And if they had just kind of like looked down and kind of thought about what they were doing, they could have figured this out. And OpenAI as a company, you hope, has people inside of it that are kind of saying those things. But then again, maybe those are the people that are no longer there, because a lot of people have been leaving OpenAI. So who knows? Either way, I think this is not a good thing for the AI industry in the mainstream at large. I think it makes it look bad. I also, as somebody who's worked in TV and media and lives in Los Angeles, it's really bad in the Hollywood industry because there's already a whole narrative going around deepfakes and all these other things. The SAG-AFTRA strike there was a piece of it all about AI. I don't think this in any way engenders the tech world to the Hollywood community. And, the tech world after the election stuff, the election mess of Facebook, is not exactly in everybody in the world's good books, let's say. So I think this is a bigger story than the tech community is giving it credit for, and maybe not as big a story as the mainstream is saying. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, exactly. I think the self-owned angle makes a lot of sense. And not just with regards to the voice, also with sort of the positioning of it, where there were tweets explicitly kind of
don't tweet her.
Flirty.
Don't tweet her. Also, like, why? You knew that you were already asking Scarlett Johansson, and she said no. Just don't tweet it. I think honestly, that tweet was what gave Scarlett Johansson the ability to kind of come after him a little bit more.
Yeah, and I think that comes from a place of being inspired, certainly to some extent, by that movie.
Which, by the way, does not end well, Andre. Does not end that great.
Exactly.
If you've seen her, it is not a fun ending for the humans. That doesn't mean all the humans die, but like, go watch that movie and tell me if you should make a video, if you should plan on the future looking like that. I'm not sure if we want that.
Yeah, and one of the outcomes of this was, a lot of people saying that the voice presented in the main demo, in the big reveal of it, was flirty, was the word used. And the Daily Show had a segment on it that basically just covered that angle of the voice being sort of very, the kind of voice that women arguably take on to cater to men.
Yes.
And that's another aspect of it where maybe they didn't fully consider the reaction people would have. Like, it's good to go away from the robotic thing we're used to, and it's impressive with, Siri and other assistants are much more formal. But maybe they took it too far, where, maybe the Daily Show would have covered the notion of it kind of being mind-blowing, you had ChatGPT. Now you have the aspect of it where it can look at your homework with its eyes and help you, whatever. And we can chat about how, wow, AI is progressing too fast, and this is both cool and scary. But no, like the segment was entirely about the voice and how it sounded, and not the other aspects. So yeah, I think they maybe fumbled it a little bit, but in the big scheme of things, it's not going to impact them too much.
The tech is still incredible, right? If what we saw in those demos and what we saw in that most recent demo from, I think, the thing in France, I am really shocked at how good that got. And, they've talked about, you probably remember this, but like OpenAI has talked about how they had these voice models for like longer than anybody else, and they weren't going to put them out right away. You can tell there's a lot of work that has gone on to this. The biggest thing I think is the latency. I can't wait to have a non-latent voice assistant, because it's fun to use the voice assistant as is, and even Pi was this way, but having to wait a couple of seconds for an answer, or even 3 or 4 seconds, it's too much. And I think the latency part of it's going to be a big deal.
It's a huge deal for sure. And the next story is again about GPT-4o, this time about Microsoft's Copilot assistant getting the GPT-4 upgrade. And that's kind of a big deal because GPT-4o is GPT-4 kind of grade, is what we've seen in terms of performance as a chatbot, even without the voice. It is about as good as GPT-4. That was a paid tier for ChatGPT, and I think maybe Microsoft Copilot to get access to that better model. But seemingly, it'll be much more broadly available for people to have GPT-4o. And aside from a voice, also GPT-4o is said to be twice as fast as GPT-4 and cheaper. Like, I've been using it in my job, and it seems like you could just replace GPT-4 Turbo with GPT-4o.
What has been your experience in the coding side of it? Because I've seen mixed reactions. Some people are saying it's great at coding, it's better. Other people are saying it's not nearly as good. Have you had that? Have you had a reaction to one way or the other yet?
Personally, I haven't had much need to do sort of big
hard coding
tasks. Yeah, exactly. I haven't had to generate entire files or whatever. So it's, for me, kind of hard to say. But still these things, we have everyone uses the extension of GitHub Copilot in the company basically. And I still get a lot of use out of it.
I was going to say really quickly, we use ChatGPT each week, whatever the latest model is, to kind of make our AI co-host prompts or to do other things with it. And I have found 4.0 to be like really good, like much better at doing things and taking complicated tasks on. These are not math-based tasks. These are more like kind of create a character tasks, but it understands better and it has a better sense of like how to parse out a longer kind of prompt, because our AI co-host prompts are pretty long, like 3 to 4 paragraphs, and it's very good at it.
Mm-hmm. And related to this, there were a couple more announcements from Microsoft. They had a pretty big event. We won't be going super deep into those, but they did also announce kind of a certification program almost for PC laptops that are like Copilot laptops, where there's a requirement that they come with chips that are specifically for AI.
The NPU, the neural processing unit, which is like seems like a gibberish word they just kind of made up. It's your brain, man. It's all in your brain. It's neural.
Yeah, we had the CPU. Now you have NPUs that are meant to be included in the hardware, and they are building this Copilot thing deep into the OS. So the intent there is, if you want real time, if you want really fast usage of these models, ideally it can be on device, and ideally, it could be as fast as possible. And I think partially that's why they've invested a lot in these smaller models like Phi. So quite a bit of news from Microsoft, and as we've seen, their partnership with OpenAI has paid dividends, including with this GPT-4o feature in their Copilot assistant. So if you've been using Copilot, I guess good news for you.
And also, don't forget about Recall. Recall was a big deal from there. Recall is a privacy concern, but the idea is that Satya Nadella announced that like there's a program now on these AI enabled PCs which will allow you to basically be listened to, and it will watch all the stuff and be able to search your computer locally, not in the cloud, locally, and you'll be able to retrieve stuff and ask questions in natural language. I think honestly this is interesting and cool. I know a lot of people are concerned they don't want a computer watching them, but like it is a fascinating use case of AI. It is the ultimate like Star Trek computer. It needs to know everything about you as well as other people and as well as the outside world. So I think that's interesting. I know a lot of people who are like, I'm never, ever, ever going to turn that on, which I understand for sure too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I should mention recall. There was a bit of pushback with the idea that AI will see everything you do. And I think my take on it is broadly, in some sense, if you want a really good AI assistant, it needs to know about everything you
Yeah.
do. So this is the way towards the best possible, the most helpful AI is if it can just see what you're doing. And you already, to some extent, have this with like the Google integrations into Gmail and Google Docs. Like it knows your documents, it knows what you are saying, right?
Yeah, it knows who you've been emailing. Probably, it knows exactly the content. It may not know everything, but it knows pretty well.
Right. So my guess is, there might be an opt-out way to disable it, but more and more this will just be the case where AI will be there and know what you're doing to generate its outputs.
Big Brother's just a fun guy. That's all, Andre. He's a fun guy that you can have around your shoulder every time. He'll just be watching you. It's not a big deal.
Yeah, Big Brother, is there to help. So.
That should be their new slogan. Big Brother's here to help. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah. And on to the lightning round with some less big stories and some quick ones. The first one is about ElevenLabs launching an AI voiced screen reader app. And that's kind of what it sounds like. ElevenLabs, of course, is one of the premier text-to-voice startups that for a while has been used a lot to demonstrate really impressive voice synthesis. And now they launched this new thing that isn't just sort of an API offering to generate voice. It's an actual sort of app you can use. It's called ElevenLabs Reader, and it can read web pages, PDFs, and other documents in various voices. And it's currently being offered free to download and use in the US, UK, and Canada. And it's nice to see. One of the things we maybe forget but are worth capturing is that AI will make accessibility for a lot of things much more powerful for people who have trouble with vision in particular, or even hearing. AI will help quite a bit, so it was nice to see this. Next up, Adobe Lightroom gets a magic eraser, and it's impressive. That's the title. So Lightroom is another offering by Adobe, somewhat similar to Photoshop, but more catered specifically to editing photographs rather than creating arbitrary images like you have in Photoshop. We've covered a lot of the features we have added to Photoshop, like generative fill. And this feature is called generative remove, once again powered by Adobe's Firefly. And similar to the in-painting, it allows users to paint over unwanted objects in images and delete them. It will offer you a few variants of how to replace the object. So again, I think Adobe has impressed us with the amount of things they've rolled out into Photoshop and Lightroom. And this will be pretty useful, I think, for photographers.
I think this is so interesting that Adobe does these things and artists are like, yeah, we love this. And then if other AI companies do things, artists are like, you're stealing everything. And I don't mean that as like they didn't steal everything, because there's a lot of bad stuff. But like Adobe is, because they've provided tools for artists for so long, it's an interesting just like branding situation. They've done a very good job of giving access to things to artists that are useful using AI. And in some ways, the artists don't balk at it because they say it's in their workflow. And I think that's an interesting kind of dynamic about how people see AI. And Adobe, thank goodness for Adobe, because they're doing a good job of kind of like onboarding some of those people. Because I think you and I and Kevin, I know we all believe the sooner that these people take on the tools that are coming, the better that they will be suited for the jobs of the future. So I think this is great. I honestly love that Adobe's doing this, and they're not getting a lot of crap for it too.
Yep. And they, I think, also positioned themselves smartly with Firefly, saying that it was trained on licensed data, not copyright data, which was...
Although there was that one story. Did you see this? There was a story that they have found it was trained on some Midjourney data as well, which kind of
Yes.
like a little poison to the whale, not perfect data. But you're right. I appreciate that too as well.
And this is currently free to use in beta, but they will probably adopt the generative credit system you have in the Firefly-powered tools. Next, Microsoft and Khan Academy will provide a free AI assistant for all educators in the US. So they have this AI assistant, Khan for teachers, and the AI assistant can do various things, of course, help prepare lessons, analyze student performance, plan assignments. For context, Khan Academy is a major institution for learning. They offer a lot of classes that cover math, cover English, etc. They've been around for quite a while. And so, I think this is pretty exciting. Teachers have a lot of work. It's quite a burden, and AI assistants can really help significantly to make it easier to keep up with it.
Yeah, my wife is teaches writing. She's a novelist and teaches writing, and I think I see a lot of the education side through her. And I really think, well, first of all, Khan Academy is amazing. It's been an incredible thing around for a long time. I think this is great. I think teachers, a friend of mine runs an organization called AI.edu that specializes in nonprofit teaching of teachers. Like their whole goal is to try to get out there and get teachers to understand AI, and they do specific things. They can figure out how to do workshops and stuff. I think the sooner we get teachers on board with what this is, the better. And I think the other thing, I think this is an interesting point that is a larger point we have to talk on in the lightning round is it's going to be interesting to see how you can individualize education per student using AI. And I think that's the transformative power of AI that's coming. This may be a starting point that getting the teachers up and running on it, but that's coming, especially when we talk about GPT 4.0 in your ears. If everybody's accessible to that, you might have a certain kind of pathway through education that's different than the student sitting next to you. And that is really exciting, I think.
Totally. Yeah, I think that's another kind of overlooked, maybe positive aspect of AI is a lot of people can't afford tutors.
Yes.
And ChatGPT is a great tutor.
My daughter is a junior in high school, and she's kind of she's not in advanced it's honors physics for her age. And she's not like a super physics head. She's not, but she likes it. She actually used ChatGPT and took the picture of the homework, and it helped her. And this was like, GPT-4. And it was really fascinating to watch. It's the use case that is the most interesting to me as a parent, but also just like that's how people are using it now. It's real world use case.
Mm-hmm. And the last story for the section, Microsoft Paint is getting an AI-powered image generator that responds to your text prompt and doodles. This tool is called Co-Creator, and we've seen similar things before. Is as you doodle things in Paint, now you have the ability to call on AI to generate an image basically conditioned on your doodle. So you can enter a text prompt. Let's say you draw a very rough looking robot with some, a rectangle head and some arms. The AI will then take that and generate a really impressive looking robot with sort of a general structure of what you've input. So yeah, Paint.
I love MS Paint, man. It's cool to see it come back. I will also say there's so many startups in this space that have that used this feature like a month or two ago as like a highlight, and now it's fully Microsoft's grabbed it. It's a piece of science technology that everybody has access to. I feel for the startups that are constantly chasing the edge in the visual technology world, because I don't think a lot of them are going to win, because this is what's going to happen. These are all tools that are like, papers are published on, like say 6 months ago, then they get productized in some way. And a company like Krea, Krea.ai, rolled this out like I think 2 or 3 months ago, and it was really cool. But now you've got one of the biggest computer software companies in the world rolling out. Like, it just feels like a losing battle for those companies trying to kind of do this again and again.
Yeah, the barrier to entry is relatively low on these kind of applications. And on to the next section, applications and business. And we start again with OpenAI and some controversy. They haven't had the best of weeks following GPT-4o. And this one is the title of the story is OpenAI founders Sam Altman and Greg Brockman go on the defensive after top safety researchers quit. So last week we covered how Ilya Sutskever and Jen Leakey, the Ilya Sutskever is, of course, a major part, the leader of AI efforts until relatively recently. And Jen Leakey was one of the leaders of their AI super alignment teams and a very influential figure. He helped develop a lot of the alignment techniques that basically everyone uses. And we covered this briefly where there was a somewhat amicable split with Sutskever. There was a lot of kind of nice words being said. Jen Leakey last week just said, I quit or something like that.
Yeah, he was like, I'm out. Not dealing with this anymore.
And then just a bit after, just a week ago on May 17, there was a much longer kind of thread that he posted in which he said, let me quote here, over the past few months, my team has been sailing against the wind. Sometimes we were struggling for compute, and it was getting harder and harder to get this crucial research done. And then also over the past years, safety culture and processes have taken a back seat to shiny products. So that was one of the causes of concern. And Greg Brockman and then Sam Altman then had to respond and say, we value safety a lot. We're doing a lot for it, et cetera, et cetera. There was a second kind of controversy with, I'm not sure if it was Leakey or someone else, quitting and saying that they didn't want to sign an NDA. And so they basically, according to the clauses that you sign with OpenAI, if you don't sign the NDA, which is super restrictive, it basically says that you're not allowed to say anything disparaging about OpenAI ever. So this person said they didn't sign the NDA, and that would mean that they forfeit their equity in OpenAI. They lose a ton of money with equity being kind of their part ownership you gain as an employee of a startup. So yeah, this was...
Which at OpenAI is a lot of money, right? When you think about what the valuation is versus a startup, like say you joined OpenAI in 2019 or 2020, that's a lot of money you're looking at that you don't get a hold of.
Right, yeah. And so, yeah, I think not, there's no exodus.
Yeah.
Not that many people are quitting or leaving. But this was enough of a kerfuffle, especially with the leaky comments and some of these stories covering the NDA that Sam Altman and others had to respond. Sam Altman also said about the equity that he was not aware of this clause. And I'm sure he was aware at least of the NDA. Right.
Yes, you would hope so. At least. It can't be Sam just saying, I didn't know again and again, right? You can't have that be the answer.
Yeah, and they did also say we never clawed back equity, things like that, and they'll be reviewing that. So this certainly led to some negative press. And, it's hard to say from the outside. It certainly sounds like the emphasis on research has been downgraded. I will say at the same time, from what we've seen of their publications, OpenAI still does seem to be doing a lot of safety research.
Yeah. I'm interested in, so I'm obviously people listening to this podcast have followed how Jan LeCun believes that like we're not really in danger of AI in trouble. And obviously the whole conversation about where AI goes from here is kind of open. I think we're all trying to figure that out still. If it continues to scale, then obviously we're going to be in some interesting places in the next 5 years. I think this is, in my mind, this whole thing just kind of is the sliding doors moment of last November, right? Like this is all the fallout finally of what happened when the board went against Sam. And, this is what's so weird and confusing about OpenAI as a company, in that, you had this relatively small company start doing something incredibly technical and yet also incredibly morality based, right? And that's a weird place for a tech company to start, because you don't often have a tech company start with the idea of like, we're going to push this technology super far forward, but also that we have to be really careful about what we're doing along the way. And I think my gut is telling me that at some point, I mean, I don't know if this happened, but in November, Sam probably had like the Darth Vader mask come down a little bit. I'm not saying he's bad. I'm not saying he's evil, but like he probably was like, I'm going into battle. And I think there's a world where there might have just been like bad blood amongst these people. And as much as like Jan said, that I'm not getting enough compute, it might be that like there was still some lingering anger over the fact that Sam wasn't taking this seriously enough. And also, who knows where Jan stands on the, is AI going to kill us all thing? Maybe Jan is, and I don't, Jan is the head of super alignment, so you assume he feels pretty strongly about this. If Jan believes that is the most important question of our time, and he's not getting enough compute, he should quit. You know what I mean? Like he should go find a way to do it somewhere else. Either way, this feels like to me the kind of reconciliation or the end of that thing that happened in November more than it is like something to be like super concerned about. That's my interpretation of it.
Yeah, I agree. And I think you said Jan versus Jen Leakey who quit.
Is it his name Jen? Is that how you say his name? Is it Jan?
Oh.
See, we've been saying Jan. Because I think it's Jan. Like I don't know, but there's Jan. Yeah, there's Jan LeCun, and then Jan, which I think might be Jan as well. But I've been saying Jan. I could be wrong. So,
okay, that makes sense. Yeah, I tend to agree. I think as if you're really a safety person and are concerned about AI in a strong way, I think you would be much more concerned about this news.
By the way, Jeremy should have been here for this conversation because I'm sure Jeremy would have some strong thoughts on this right now for sure.
Exactly, yeah. And it sounds like the team itself has been disbanded, the super alignment team, and they were doing the most aggressive research. The research that is less about, let's say, the present tense of AI and more about the future implications of the danger of AI to even like extinction level. So yeah, I think if you're someone really concerned about the potential for extinction or WMDs and things like that, this is bad news. I'm a little less concerned on that direction. So I think for me, it's similar to what you said, where I don't think it's a huge blow necessarily. I think OpenAI still does have quite a bit of commitment to safety. It's just that with the shift to being commercial, the priorities have definitely shifted to some extent. Next up, it's another story about OpenAI. It feels like
they're making the news, man. They're making the news.
They're doing a lot. And this one is about how OpenAI has made a deal with the WSJ, Wall Street Journal owner News Corp, that is valued at over $250 million. So it sounds like the deal is $250 million over 5 years, and that would include compensation in the form of cash and credits for use of OpenAI technology. We've seen this before with, for instance, with Financial Times, where
Reddit.
OpenAI,
yep.
And then many newspapers where OpenAI is licensing the data for training and is also providing the tools to these publishers to then integrate OpenAI's technology into their tech. And this deal is the biggest one we've heard so far. I mean, this is a big number, 250 million. And News Corp's shares went up 7% in trading after this news. Exactly. Yeah. So a bit less to say on this one, but I think it's a very big deal just to see that OpenAI is going after these deals aggressively. This is, I think, about the 6th or 7th one we know about, and they have many ongoing negotiations, no doubt. So it seems like another kind of thing that everyone is doing, not just OpenAI. Google also was set to license Reddit's data. And it's another kind of truth of the present of AI is it's a little past the phase where you could just scrape the internet, as all these companies basically did. Now you have to actually pay people. And it's another kind of challenge to the commercialization of AI and trying to be profitable. But in some sense, it's good news because being a news publisher is hard.
Oh,
it has been hard for a while, and this is one of the ways that it's going to be a little bit easier.
I think so. And I think the other kind of secret story here, we had Kevin Rose, the guy who founded Dig on our podcast not that long ago, who's a friend of ours from way back when. He is a startup founder, right? And also like is a VC venture capital investor. And his big thing was everything that's valuable in the future is going to be data, because that's what we're going to be finding is what is valuable here. And I also recommend very highly to go listen to. There's a great podcast called Search Engine, which is by a guy named PJ Vogt, and he had Casey Newton on this week talking about the kind of Google, the issue with Google and how like AI search is going to kind of take away a lot of the links to the internet. And so I think that the kind of really difficult thing for journalists or people that work in the news industry right now is how do you get paid for doing the work you were doing forever if you're not going to get traffic to your website? And this is a big, big problem, because the other side of this is if you don't get paid, if there is no way to get paid to do that, people stop doing those jobs. You know what I mean? Like there'll be a lot less people providing the data. So this is like the kind of balance the AI business world has to kind of deal with right now, is like, how do we value data? How do we value the stuff that we need to train these AI systems on, versus how do we value the people that make those things and write those things? And as you and I are both podcasters, like I very much assume in the future, if you're doing a weekly podcast like this, at some point you're going to get a call from like an OpenAI or somebody like that and say like, hey, we'll pay you, a very small amount, or depending on how big your audience is, this much money to train on your podcast. Are you okay with that? And I kind of think everybody's going to have to make that conversation and choice. And right now it's just the corporations, because you can make these broad deals. But I think there's going to be this kind of opt-in for something in the future.
Yeah, and to some extent, maybe it'll become more of a anyone can do it potentially over time, right?
Yeah.
Where anyone can opt in, not just the big companies, but YouTubers can just say, okay, I'll provide my data and you'll get not necessarily a huge amount, but you'll get some amount. So that'll be interesting.
Exactly.
On to the lightning round. First up, CoreWeave raises $7.5 billion in debt for AI computing push. We do like covering the billion stories, so this is pretty big. CoreWeave is an AI cloud computing startup, and they got this $7.5 billion from various investors for a private debt financing deal. This is following up 1.1 equity funding from 2 weeks ago that valued CoreWeave at 19 billion. And they're saying that they're going to expand a lot. So they operate 14 data centers as of last year, and they're planning to double to 28 data centers at the end of this year. So it just demonstrates a lot of efforts going into compute everywhere.
Yeah, I saw this and I was like, wow, there's just so much VC money being poured into AI right now. It does worry me a little bit that maybe we're in a bubble, but it's hard to know, because it's really difficult to know. Is this Web 2.0? Is this the internet? Is this like computers? Like, you don't really know. You go back through like kind of the transitions, or maybe it's like Web 3.0, which was, whatever. Then you had mobile web. Then you had Web 2.0, which was like kind of the social web. Then you had the internet. And then you go further back and you have like, actual personal computers. It's hard to know how big this is, but it feels like based on the amount of money that's being poured into it and how fast things are changing, it's at least internet level, which is a big deal. But that is a really big deal, the fact that we are talking about internet level. But if you remember, Andre, the thing that happened after the big internet boom, there was a giant internet bust, and a lot of these companies went belly up, and it was ugly. So I don't know. We'll have to see where this ends up at.
For sure. And you have to ask yourself, it might be kind of a dot-com bubble situation. It could also be more like the smartphone situation, where the last, I think, major technological shift was everyone started having a smartphone. And you could argue that in this case, everyone will start using AI.
Yes, exactly.
And the VC money mostly is going to the like top tier AI developers, and for, in this case, infrastructure companies.
Which makes sense, by the way, because it's kind of like the internet. You had to like build the cable, you had to build like the pipelines to get everybody broadband. Like that was a really good investment back then. this is similar in some ways as well too.
Mm-hmm. And another story about compute, one of the stories we didn't cover last week, is that Google announced Trillium, its sixth generation of Tensor processors. So they have their TPUs, now have TPUs V6 that are set to be 4.7 times faster than the predecessors. And they also have pods that will have up to 256 of them in kind of a cloud offering. And as I like to say, it's worth remembering that Google, it's many people said they may be a little bit behind OpenAI, Microsoft, but they do have a lot of advantages in infrastructure, and this is one of them with the TPUs that they've had over a decade now of development. So Google still pushing on that front pretty rapidly. And after that, next up, Inflection AI has revealed their new team and their new business plan. So a few weeks ago or months ago, I forget, Inflection AI, the developer of Poe, the emotionally intelligent chatbot, had this kind of crazy news of most of the company going to work for Microsoft in getting some large amount of funding or payment rather to get the investors whole, following, I think, kind of them admitting that they haven't figured out how to commercialize and make a profit after getting more than $1 billion in funding. Well, now they have announced the new members, their new CEO, CTO, CEO, and leader of product. And the statement is they are going to be pivoting somewhat to business, to providing their emotionally intelligent kind of functionality to businesses for them to build personalized chatbots that can remember customer interactions and respond in ways that feel considerate and helpful. So it makes a lot of sense. If you want to make money, you usually want to cater to businesses. And we'll see, I guess, if Inflection AI does stick around.
I think this is interesting, mostly because Reid Hoffman is a big investor in Inflection, and Reid Hoffman also the founder of LinkedIn. So I bet you're going to see a LinkedIn voice chat in some form powered by Pi. And listen, I love Pi. Pi was our first real love of voice chat. I hope this continues and survives in some form or another.
Mm-hmm. And one last story for the section. Data labeling startup Scale AI raises $1 billion as valuation doubles to $13.8 billion. This company has been around for quite a while. This is their Series F round.
I didn't even know they got that far. I didn't know they did Series F. That's amazing.
I know, that's pretty high. They've been around, I forget, maybe for at least a decade. Oh, they founded in 2016, so a while ago. And they, at the time, were riding the wave of deep learning. AI has been hyped for quite a while. We may forget now, but it's been around for a while in the mainstream. And they are specialized in kind of data curation, data gathering, a pretty essential component in the development of machine learning models. So another billion going to a major company.
And it's infrastructure, right? I mean, this is the thing that's going to make these work better. And I think that's going to be a huge part of what everybody needs when they look with these models. So I think this one makes sense to me. Kind of more so than you see that we might have covered this, but ElevenLabs raised $150 million or something like that recently on $1 billion valuation. And I love ElevenLabs, but also it's hard for me to understand exactly what their business model will be with what OpenAI and other companies can do. Whereas this company, you can see the deep need for this across the board. It makes sense to me.
Totally. Yeah. On to projects and open source. And we begin with Abacus AI releasing Smog Llama Free 70B Instruct.
Can these guys get better at naming these? I love the open source community, but these names have to change. Make it something a little bit less crazy.
Maybe, yeah. Well, they do at least have Smog in there, which is fun.
Exactly. That's fun, yeah.
And they say this is the new benchmark in open source conversational AI that rivals GPT-4 Turbo. So they basically have combined Llama 3 and trained a bunch more on it. They have already released previous smog models and even a technical report where they say they kind of figured out a lot of details of how to fine tune these models to get them better. And so they compare it to Llama 3, and it seems to be quite a bit better, especially on the harder benchmarks of Arena Hard. And it's not quite at the level of GPT-4 Turbo, but they say it does rival it. If you look at MT bench scores, another benchmark. So yeah, it's the open source isn't quite at the level of Claude, Opus, or GPT-4, but we are getting closer. And this is what we've seen over and over: is if you have a big model like Llama 3, people will make it better, and that's just the magic of open source.
Which is great. That's what you want with open source. Although there is a rumor right now, if you don't know if you've seen this, Andre, that and this is completely a rumor, so don't quote me on this, that Meta is considering not open sourcing their 400 billion parameter model of Llama, which is a big deal, right? Like if they're going to then pivot and have their biggest models not be open source, that's like a big thing. And I think everybody's been giving Mark Zuckerberg a lot of credit, rightly, for supporting open source. And I think to your point, open source development is an amazing thing because it allows people to build off of it. It'll be interesting to see if they kind of continue that with some of their bigger models as well.
Definitely, yeah. I think one of the things that really stands out is not many companies can build a GPT-4 level system. Really, right now, Anthropic and OpenAI are the two big players on that front, and Google also with Gemini. Yep. So if Meta catches up in some sense and builds a GPT-4 level model, it certainly will be, let's say, hard to release that and not keep the advantage of being one of the few players that can do this.
I have a question for you. That's 5 companies you just said, right? Mm-hmm. Let's see. Meta, Google, Anthropic, GPT-4. That's 4, I guess, right? So OpenAI, 4. Do you think those 4 companies can exist? Like, do we need 4 of these models? These cutting edge models? Like, where do you see that world going? To me, 4 companies seems like a lot in that space.
Yeah, I think the argument has been, or one of the ways to put it is, this is in some sense going to be a commodity market.
Yeah,
where it'll
just get cheaper.
It's a race to the bottom.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's a race to the bottom, and the space is big enough for supporting different players. I think it does make some sense to have an offerings of different models. There'll be various partnerships. Amazon is working with Anthropic. Google is working on its own. So it's similar to how there are different cloud providers in the ecosystem. There'll be different frontier model providers, but it's not going to be a ton of players.
That makes sense.
And next up, speaking of the evaluation of smog on these hard prompts, well, the Chatbot Arena has introduced a new category of evaluation called hard prompts that evaluate models with user-submitted prompts that are more complex and rigorous, designed to really test the capabilities of the biggest models. So on these tests, Claude Opus has a score of 60, GPT-4 Turbo is at 82. So it's a little less saturated, so to speak. We've seen this a lot with a ton of benchmarks that pretty rapidly they just get into the area of solved. So evaluation is one of the things that is getting harder and harder with these things. And now they have these kinds of more hard things. And the way they built this, briefly, is they actually used Llama 3 to label over 1 million arena prompts on whether they meet certain criteria like specificity, domain knowledge, real-world application. And if you scored high enough on these criteria, you then lead to being a hard prompt. So no doubt we'll start seeing the numbers with any new model on how it does on hard prompts.
You know what I want to see with this? This is a dumb thing, but I think it would be really interesting. I think they should start giving these to humans as well, meaning that you should get, in addition to the models, you should have a human score, which could be like a randomized, maybe there's some sort of system where you can send these out to people to answer, or almost like Mechanical Turk style, get a bunch of people to answer them. I would love to see like how actual humans perform on these new prompts, because I think that will be an interesting dynamic too. Because of course you can always assume that like this is what they do, but like I would love to see that as an aspect of this as well.
Yeah, that exists for some benchmarks, I believe, like
I think
math and
so.
so
Yeah,
on.
exactly. Yeah, they're taking basic ideas. Yeah, exactly. But it'd
Yeah,
be fun to see that
so
in the hard prompts too, because I bet a lot of humans would have trouble with some of the hard prompts.
yeah, for sure. I think so because you need to know a lot of facts
Yeah,
and
exactly. It's
skill
not easy.
sets.
No, it's not
Yeah,
easy.
yeah. And the last story for this section, Microsoft brings out a small language model that can look at pictures. So yet again, Microsoft has introduced a variant of their Phi models, their small large language models, and this time it's Phi free vision, which can analyze images and describe their contents. So we've seen this broadly where you no longer really have LLMs in a lot of cases. Everything is a multimodal model, and this is another example of that. As with previous Phi models, they focused on making it relatively small, 4.2 billion parameters, but they have managed to squeeze a lot of capability out of that. And they have previously launched this Phi free family of models just in April. So they're building a lot of stuff. And no doubt this will be utilized in some of their offerings.
Absolutely. I mean, smaller models are great for people to try different stuff, and I think it's a very cool thing to see.
Mm-hmm. On to research and advancements, and we begin with quite a big development on the research front coming from Anthropic. So they even got some press out of this. The coverage, for instance, from Gizmodo is titled "New Anthropic Research Sheds Light on AI's Black Box."
Also, you can talk to the Golden Gate Bridge, Andre. That's a big part of this as well as in the thing too.
Yeah, and you can definitely make some fun kind of things out of this research.
Exactly.
So this research, as the title suggests, is primarily on interpretability, being able to understand how large language models work, what kind of goes on inside the crazy large neural net that leads to certain outcomes and not others. And this is building on a couple of years of research from Anthropic. So it's really building on techniques they've been exploring for quite a while. To explain it in brief about going super technical, what they do is they look at the activations of a neural net in sort of the middle layers of a model. They look at the outputs that are happening in there, and they train another model to try and compress them. So they build a dictionary of features that represent the different combinations of neurons in a neural net at their outputs. And then what happens is you can look at these features and label them as being related to certain things. So, for instance, there is a golden gate feature that is the neurons output the certain pattern of activations for parts of an input that relate to the Golden Gate Bridge. So that's when you see that feature kind of having high numbers as opposed to being low. And they discovered a ton of features. I think it was, I forget the exact number, but many features related to all sorts of stuff. So related to coding, related to names, and of interest to safety reasons, there were features related to bias, to sycophancy, deception, and one of the big deals about this is we've seen some research in the past where you can manipulate the outputs and the behavior of neural nets by basically messing with the outputs of a neural net. You can take a certain set of activations and set it to 0 or maximize it, and the neural net behaves differently. So that Golden Gate example is they took this feature and they maxed it out. And then as soon as
it believed it was the Golden Gate Bridge, it suddenly believed that you were talking to the Golden Gate Bridge. But this is such an interesting thing to me. I think the thing whenever I talk to people about AI and tell them the fact that most AI researchers didn't really understand how these things were working, they were like, "Are you crazy? The people that built these things didn't really understand why they were giving the answers back." And that part is a huge deal if they can kind of if we can understand better why these things work. I also think, and this is like pop science in my own take, is like how little we understand about how the human brain works in some ways too, right? Like what's interesting is like I wonder if kind of getting inside the black box of these AIs and how they're putting things together may illuminate some more interesting stuff in the world of brain science even, right? Like finding different ways that this kind of stuff could lead to even bigger understandings outside of AI is pretty exciting. But mostly I think the good thing, honestly, it's funny with Anthropic because we always joke about Anthropic as being like the goody two shoes AI model, and that like they don't give us the answers that we want to be the funniest, or we can't manipulate the AI to do the things that we might want to do creatively on the show sometimes. But I really do appreciate the fact that they're doing this work in conjunction with releasing cutting edge models because look, we needed this. We needed to understand better how these things worked. And now we have a sense of it. And I think, especially on the manipulation side, because I think the bigger worry that the super alignment teams have, or I have more so than like the AI, like, paperclip problem of taking over everything, is that somebody would allow an AI to do something that could be harmful to us being driven by a human. So, like, being able to kind of stop the most malicious use cases of AI is a good thing. And I think this will get us closer to that space.
For sure. And I always want to push back a little bit on this notion we don't understand what's going on in.
No, please do, because I don't. That's what I've heard along the way. But yeah, let's hear your take on it.
I think this is a very typical thing to say: is we just don't know what's happening, and to some extent, it's true. But on the other hand, there has been decades of research, and especially more in the deep learning era, coming up with interoperability techniques, and this,
right,
of course, is building on years of research and years of reasoning.
Of course. Yeah. So this is not like out of the blue. This is not. They're not saying like we did it. It's like there are multiple like people who have kind of added to the research that kind of brought this forward, essentially.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's kind of as a simple summary, it's true we don't know exactly what's going on, similar to how we don't really know what's going on in our brains, but we do have some notion at least.
Yes. And hopefully more as we go forward, right? Like that's the coolest thing in both cases, both AI and brains. It's like, I would hope over the next 5 to say 15 years, we're going to understand really well how both of those things work based on how science is advancing.
Right. And another thing I'll say is I think this is a pretty big deal. Like this is a very impressive result in the world of interoperability and the ability to steer what these models do. I would recommend to people, if you're interested, Anthropic has a blog post mapping the mind of a large language model that is pretty approachable. You don't have to.
It's very approachable. As somebody who's not a machine learning expert, I read it and totally grokked it and understood it, which was great.
Yeah, and it's pretty fascinating to see that in these large language models, you wind up with a feature for the Golden Gate Bridge. And just to be clear, it's not just the Golden Gate Bridge. That's like the thing it activates for the most, but it also, to some partial extent, represents things that are nearby the Golden Gate Bridge, San Francisco and the 49ers team, the San Francisco Bay Area, Stanford. These are some of the things that are nearby. And there are just what features exist. There's an Amelia Earhart feature. There are features for immunology, for Book of Titus, gender bias, code errors. Tons of examples of really interesting findings as to what is represented in the neural net and what you can find. And you can really do a lot with this. I think functionally, you can start using neural nets in a slightly different way. So
and personalize them, right? Like your Amelia Earhart example. Like, sure, you can make an Amelia Earhart character that you want to interact with, but if you kind of push on the model a little bit and say, "No, you are Amelia Earhart," in a way that makes it make sense, that's a really much more powerful version than telling the generalized model, "Okay, pretend to be Amelia Earhart." That part's a really big deal as well, too. I think
for sure. And next up, a paper from Meta, Chameleon Mixed-Modal Early Fusion Foundation Models. So in some sense, similar to GPT-4o, that in GPT-4o, they said it was a natively multimodal system. And so here it's related, where it's this early fusion token-based mixed modal model is capable of understanding and generating images and text in a sequence. So it is differing from some of the other approaches to multimodal training. One of the approaches you can have is you just take an image and create its embedding and input that separate from the inputs to the large language model, and then you merge that knowledge kind of later on. So you treat them separately. And so here they have the notion of early fusion, where basically you treat both images and text as one long stream. And the model gets everything, and it can also output everything as a long string of text and then image and text, so on. So I think very related to things like GPT-4o. And there are a bunch of examples in the paper of asking for some quirky looking birds, and then the model can say, absolutely, here are 3 birds. It can give you a picture, and also this kill-build toucan, apparently image of a bird. So yeah, I think multimodality and native multimodality, where the model is just trained on inputs that are sound, that are text, that are images, is the new frontier of development.
I was going to say, one of the things that Kevin Scott, the CTO of Microsoft, talked about at their Build conference this week was the idea that he doesn't see the scaling laws of AI slowing down, despite all the kind of AI winter people out there saying that it might be slowing down. To me, as a non-scientist, this is where you go next, right? Because we've trained a lot of text, we've trained a lot of things, but if you're suddenly training on sound, the world, videos, all these things, I still think that and this is going to sound crazy because I don't have any basis for this, but like, I still think like the edge of training is going to be putting video at capture devices on people as they walk around, because then you are literally training for the real world in full 3D sound, audio, smells, all these things eventually. That is where we're going. And I think the idea that multimodal is the base layer just makes sense, right? Because we are not just thinking or typing creatures. We are talking creatures. We are visual creatures. We are listening creatures, like all that stuff. This is where I think we're going to get way, way closer to what AGI is. And I think it's pretty exciting to see not just OpenAI pursuing it, but Meta, who's got a crap load of resources at their disposal.
Yeah, and the paper does go into it, and these numbers always kind of blow me away. They trained a 7 billion and a 44 billion variant, and they say for a 34 billion variant, they used 3,072 concurrent GPUs that amounted to 400,000 more than 400,000 GPU hours.
That's
the
incredible.
scale you need to be at to even, in this case, do research. Like, researchers are spending probably hundreds of thousands on these papers.
Yeah, I would. I mean, honestly, and this is, and I think there's a little bit of a competition to publish, right? Because like, if you're at Meta and you publish something, that probably with the people at Google look like, oh, damn, we were working on that. Like, it's very academic wise. I think it's very competitive in that sense too. Although I don't know, I shouldn't say I'm not at these research departments, but I assume there is a race to get the stuff out as quickly as you can.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
And on to the lightning round. First up, Cat 3D. Create anything in 3D with multi-view diffusion models. So the idea is you can give this approach one image or maybe just a couple images, and they use a diffusion model to generate other viewpoints of that thing that you input. And from those many images, you can then use kind of the known techniques to create a 3D reconstruction. So in the past, it used to be you needed a ton of images, like 60 images of a given object, for instance, to create a 3D reconstruction. 3D has been seeing very rapid advancements in AI, and this is one example of that, where just with one image, you can now get pretty high quality reconstructions. And the next paper is also on 3D. It is Coin 3D, controllable and interactive 3D asset generation with proxy-guided conditioning. And what that fancy wording means is instead of inputting images, let's say you want text to 3D, what you can do is give it essentially a sketch in 3D. Kind of, let's say you add a rough 3D shape of a humanoid, and then you say a teddy bear, panda, and robot. For each of those things, you would have a rough shape of your sketch, of your 3D sketch, but with that identity. So very similar to what you've seen in a 2D domain, of you give it a sketch and you can prompt it to do different things in that sketch. Now you can do that in 3D, and very fun.
That feels like we're getting to the sci-fi world that I wanted when I was a kid, right? As a sci-fi nerd, like imagine, and again, this all is depending on, like, at some point there will be some face computer that will be usable by everybody and they'll like it, and it won't feel like you're sitting in ski goggles that put you in a dungeon. But like, imagine a world where you can, like, suddenly wherever you are in your world, like, draw a circle, a square, and two little sticks, and suddenly you can develop a little robot character for you to be around. It's like that stuff is where you're like, I get this. It's super fun. It's also the MS Paint thing. It's like MS Paint is kind of a toy, what they announced, this idea. But imagine that then in the real world, being able to do that in 3D, like that feels like a very fun place to live.
Yeah, and there's a lot of concerns about the impact this will have on artists, rightfully. So this kind of thing in the future, it'll be much easier for people to create 3D models.
Yes.
Even already, that's to some extent the case. And there's a big pro on that, where if you're a creative, let's say you want to develop a video game as a solo indie dev, much easier now.
Yes.
But also,
they don't need 30 people on the animation side. This is the give and take of all this stuff.
Mm-hmm. Next up, a paper from Amazon, SpeechVerse, a large-scale generalizable audio language model. So this is about an approach where they do multitask training and various tweaks to create a speech and text foundation model, where it can do all sorts of things with speech, transcription. It can identify intent, number of speakers, lots of that sort of thing. And this is one of the challenges typically with audio models we've seen, is it's harder to get a ton of data compared to large language models. So this is a big effort on Amazon's front, and they do show that compared to task-specific models, as is usually the case, this big foundation model that can do all sorts of stuff is better. And last up in the section is another paper from Amazon, released on the same day as that previous model. It is SpeechGuard, exploring the adversarial robustness of multimodal large language models. And this is kind of interesting. We've covered a lot how you have jailbreak prompts, where you can tweak the text you input to a model and get it to do things that it's not supposed to do, like tell you how to make drugs. Well, with these text audio models, turns out you can do that with audio as well. They showcase how you can perturb the audio a little bit to get the model to do whatever you want it to do. And they do present a way to guard against that with some pre-processing. So yeah, it's always going to be a race between people who want to get these models to do nefarious things and these kinds of defense mechanisms.
I always wonder with this, because as somebody who's been on the internet, not from the very beginning, because I'm not that old, but from like the 80s, there's always been this idea that, like, when you're on the internet, like, oh, look, you can find this thing and you can do this thing. But then eventually you're like, yeah, it's there. I don't need it. I don't care about it. So I wonder if at some point with these LLMs and voice or text, it'll just be like, yeah, sure, you can find where to make methamphetamine, but are you going to do it? Like, I don't want to be in the business, or I don't think anybody should be in this business of censoring specific stuff. I don't think that's part of why we do this stuff. The open web is a really important thing to me personally. It's different though, and this is where the voice thing comes in weird, right? Like if your kid, if some, maybe not my family, but like say my kid asked like that question just because they were being sneaky, like, how do I make methamphetamine? And then Amazon Alexa said it out loud, and they're like, well, here's how you do it. you can bet like the middle of America, there's going to be a lot of parents that will be upset if they hear that, whether or not the kid's ever going to act on it. So this stuff is important. I almost think from a business standpoint more than it is from a important, like we need to break this so that it doesn't do these things. Now, granted, the other side of this is jailbreaking is something that in the AI doomers world eventually could be used to let the AI go rogue and then do the paperclip problem on all of us. So that side of it, I'm happy to be aware of as well too.
Yeah, and I think even right now you can protect against creating not safe for work images, and maybe that's not the worst thing, but then again, you might make deepfakes of people, and
yes, that's also
pretty
true.
terrible.
Okay, you're right. I'm on your side now. I've come around.
Yeah, there are examples for sure where you don't want to jailbreak. Like some cases are more benign, but there are also pretty bad ones.
Yeah.
On to the next section, policy and safety. And we start once again with a story about the EU AI Act, which we've covered probably a dozen times, at least over the years, as it's kind of moved towards final ratification. Well, this story is that it gets the final EU green light. It sounds like this is basically finally going towards being adopted. As we've covered many times before, it does a lot with regulation of AI. In particular, it creates risk categories, and that would impose some requirements on developers, on companies releasing said AI to ensure safety. And those include things like predictive policing, emotional recognition, social scoring, things like that. So finally, there is a final green light. We kind of knew this was coming, but it's cool to hear kind of this big milestone. And then now the slow rollout of it is going to begin. So it's not going to be impacting anything for a while, but big deal in the history of AI regulation.
Yeah, and it's probably going to be messy, right? Like I feel like all these things there's a messiness to them, and I think this is also the trade-off of like, okay, well, we want to regulate because we don't want these bad things to happen, but then what doesn't get developed because those things don't happen? Like that's the kind of story of technology throughout all the universe. I often wonder sometimes, did the social media revolution or whatever you want to call it, devolution, some people would say, set the table for over-regulation now? And that's an interesting thing. Like when you think like, are we being too strong? And the EU obviously comes at this in a much stronger way, I think, than the States does. But it is interesting to think about, like, would we have gotten this strong of regulation around something like this if we hadn't had the problems with Facebook or other social media companies?
Yeah, and I think the EU has taken a very strong stance for a while now with antitrust, data protection laws, etc. So I would say it's definitely shaped their general philosophy towards regulation.
Yeah, exactly.
And the next story is also about regulation, this time in the US. Colorado governor has signed a sweeping AI regulation bill. So this is apparently the first in the nation law coming from a big state regulating AI that would have requirements of high risk AI systems, similar to what we have in the EU Act, that would require using reasonable care to avoid algorithmic discrimination, for instance. So it's very much focused on the issue of discrimination. And it's one of the early kind of outputs of states we've seen before. I think we did cover some laws that exist for facial recognition and identifying people. And this one is coming more after ChatGPT and its whole big impact. So part of, I think, one of the early bills, but there's going to be a lot of laws being passed around the country.
I think there's this as somebody who wasn't, I don't think you were not born in America, right, Andre? Is that right? Yeah.
Correct,
so in America, the EU is a bunch of countries, actual countries that have banded together to act as a one organization. In America, we have 50 states that all are passing their own laws. That in America, the weirdest thing is you have state law and federal law. I am really worried that this is just going to get messy as hell. There was another story this week the California Senate has passed a very comprehensive AI regulation bill that is conceivably holding these startups, specifically, the larger startups, to a higher standard than, say, that they were held during the internet era. And it's all good, but like, I wish we had some sort of coalescing around the ideas that everybody agrees on, because it's in America, especially, it's going to get very messy. Because there was this bill passed in Tennessee, the Elvis Act, which was mostly about deep fakes, and now you've got this bill in Colorado, which is about something different. Like, there's so many of these issues to deal with. I just wish there was a more comprehensive strategy. And from what I've heard at the federal level, and I'm not like sitting in these meetings with Chuck Schumer or anybody, but there isn't enough pressure to kind of get around this whole thing. And also, there was a big story a couple of days ago, and maybe I don't know if we're covering it later, is that the lobbying efforts of the AI companies has skyrocketed, right? So you had at a federal level this sense of like, okay, we're going to figure out some sort of regulation. And now maybe they're a little bit more like, hey, let's let this kind of play out a little bit. This doesn't make me feel good. I'm not a big fan of, I don't think government functions that well in the first place, but now we've got non-technical people in different states making laws that are going to have to intertwine and interact in different ways. And this almost worries me more than the alignment issue, right? Like, this feels like the fundamental problem we're going to be dealing with is, how do non-technical people interpret the dangers and situational problems with AI? That feels like a big deal.
For sure. And we're not going to be going into it, but I did see that article about lobbying that basically said that major companies, Meta, Nvidia, and so on, have started spending a lot on lobbyists with kind of a general direction of downplaying the danger of AI. It used to be that more lobbying happened from effective altruists and so on. Now these companies are pushing a much different direction where AI is not necessarily super dangerous, certainly not extinction level dangerous, but we do want to limit the ability of China to develop AI, things like that. And so, it will have a big impact on things like regulating copyright and the use of data. And we'll see what comes out of it.
Isn't it funny how quickly narratives can change? And for all we know, it could be the fact that crypto crashed and Sam Altman got out of the game, which is hilarious. Sorry, not Sam. It could be the fact that crypto crashed and Sam from what's Sam? What is that Sam's last name? I can't remember it.
SBF Friedman.
SBF, yeah, that's right. For all we know, it could be the fact that crypto crashed and SBF has got out of the effective altruist lobbying game. But that's where things happen. You know what I mean? Like, that's the weirdest thing to me. Still, as an American who's lived here my whole life, it is a weird system. America is a weird system, and it will continue to be.
Yep. And now to the lightning round. First up, going to the federal level of the U.S., this bipartisan group of senators has proposed a $32 billion plan in annual AI spending, but also deferring regulation. So the plan is titled Driving U.S. Innovation in AI, and they are calling for this $32 billion in annual funding by 2026 for both development of AI in government and the private sector. There's recommendations for the creation of federal data privacy laws and various things like that. But they are not, as he said, really pushing for regulation very quickly on this front.
Yeah, it's this is exactly what I was just referring to, is this idea that it does feel like it. I heard a podcast today, I can't remember what it was, but they were talking specifically about this idea that AI is an important fact to everybody, and everybody understands now how big a deal it is, but nobody is really pushing in one specific direction from a federal level. And it's a little worrisome, but also maybe that's just where we're going to be for a second.
Next up, Google DeepMind launches new framework to assess the dangers of AI models. This is the Frontier Safety Framework by DeepMind, and the intent is to be a little bit less ad hoc and more principled in how they do evaluation of safety. One of the things it says is they want to reevaluate DeepMind's models, every time the compute power used to train the model increases sixfold or is fine-tuned for 3 months, that's a real sign of where we are at. And they do say they want to collaborate with other companies, academia, and lawmakers to improve the framework, with some plans to start implementing auditing tools by 2025. So yeah, a very much more explicit detailing of how they are planning to, in particular for frontier, like every large next step in AI models, how they plan to uh, have safety and evaluation in mind.
Yeah, I mean, to me, if you want a future job safety in general, like this is not a bad position to go into. You have to think, if you're listening to this show and it's interesting to you, AI safety is going to grow very fast as an opportunity for people to work in, because to your point, these are going to come much quicker, and you're going to have a lot of people kind of focused in on this. And even if they're not as many of them are at OpenAI, everywhere it's going to grow. And I think it's a big deal. And kudos to DeepMind for doing this.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of safety frameworks, the next story is that tech giants have pledged to AI safety commitments, including a kill switch if they can't mitigate risks. And so some of these giants are Microsoft, Amazon, and OpenAI. And this happened at the Seoul AI Safety Summit, as we've covered before. This is kind of a follow-up to the first AI Safety Summit that happened in the UK. So they are committed. This is a voluntary commitment to publish safety frameworks that detail how they will handle challenges and have red lines that define intolerable risk associated with frontier models. And as per the title, in extreme circumstances, they plan to have a kill switch to halt the development of AI models if they cannot guarantee risk mitigation. As before, this is words. We'll see if it converts to actions, but still doesn't hurt.
Andre, the thing that shocks me about this story, and I remember when it came up, I just like, the fact that the UK Prime Minister said that this is the world first in terms of global AI companies agreeing on safety agreements. Like, can you imagine even 3 years ago, something at this scale talking about the world of AI and how fast we've progressed from what I think a lot of people for a little while, maybe in the 3 years is too soon, but a lot of people for a little while was like, oh, this is just not going to be the thing we thought it was, to suddenly now we have world leaders saying that this is one of the most important things that they are dealing with. And that it just makes me kind of step back and be like, oh my God, we really have gotten into a completely different sort of universe than we were back then. It just feels weird.
It feels very weird, and I've been reflecting on this. I kind of miss the days of 2020,
people not caring as much. Yeah,
2021,
exactly.
when it was like AI development has been crazy fast for a long time now, for at least a decade.
Yeah,
and it felt like we were making rapid progress years ago already, but in comparison to now, now it's every month there's big news, there's big progress. We're seeing this with 3D, with audio, and it's a little tiring, honestly.
it is. And also, it's change, right? Humans are really not made for change happening this fast. And I think that's why I always tell people, like, they're like, how do I prepare for the future if my job goes away? It's like, and first of all, I was like, you never know if your job's going to go away. But second of all, just try stuff and don't get overwhelmed, because it's easy to get overwhelmed, but just continue to stay aware of things. Listen to podcasts like this or like ours, and it does help, but it's going to change. We're just changing faster and faster. It's just the way time works, but it is crazy. This part really made me stand up and be like, wow, this is crazy.
Yeah, I mean, you gotta at least start adopting. I think
Yes.
It's gonna get more and more crazy.
Yeah, exactly.
And on to the last section, synthetic media and art. And first up, we have a story that Sony Music has warned tech companies over unauthorized use of its content to train AI. Apparently, they issued warnings to over 700 tech companies and music streaming services, cautioning them against using its music to train AI without explicit permission. Sony Music does have a lot of notable figures like Harry Styles, Beyonce, Adele, and Celine Dion. And I will say, I think they believe, it sounds like, that some of these companies have already made an authorized use of audio and artwork, lyrics, and looking at some of these big text to song things like Udio and Suno, I would be surprised if I haven't used copyrighted data in the training of their models.
I've spent a lot of time with these. I really, because I'm a big music person, but also I was really, we had the CEO of Suno on our show a while ago, maybe 6 months ago, actually, and they're really magical. But and this is a big but. There were stories that came out a couple weeks ago where people, it was kind of the mainstream, was finally getting a hold of Udio and Suno, and I had this experience myself where I swear to God, one of the times that I generated a song, it was Johnny Cash's voice. And I mean, more so than people think Scarlett Johansson is Sky, this was Johnny Cash singing a song. And I want to believe that these companies are operating the right way, but they're probably, I think it's pretty obvious, they probably wouldn't have gotten this good without training on some real music. So I also, in kind of hand in hand with this goes, is that Suno just raised a big round, right? And like Suno raised, I think, a round at $125 million round at like $1 billion valuation as well. I am so curious to know how the legality of all this plays out, because if you're familiar with the history of the internet, the music companies are some of the most litigious companies that have ever existed in this space. They are going to come after it hard. Now, the question will be is, do they want to find a way to grow their pie, which might mean these AI tools, they will make a deal with them or perhaps buy one of them and say, we're going to find a way to let our artists, get paid for this, and we're going to get paid for this, and then we're going to allow this to exist? Or are they just going to go after them and like shut them down? I think it's probably more likely the former, based on how Napster went and it kind of screwed them over, the Napster problem. But I think this is a huge problem for those music generating AIs. And I think they're going to have to come to the table and pony up a little bit. That's my feeling.
That's right. Yeah, this letter apparently asked the recipients to provide details about which of the group's songs were used to train the AI systems, how they were accessed, and they were given a deadline to respond. And it sounds like there was a warning that if you don't respond, Sony is planning to enforce its copyright to the fullest extent of the law. And I do agree that we've seen this with text-to-image models, that companies did use copyrighted data and kind of got away with it so far, although there's been various lawsuits from authors against OpenAI and so on. But in music, it's a whole different ballgame to some extent.
I think the big question will be, and maybe this will force the hand of this, the larger legal question about all this training data is, the idea is, do you see the AI system as a person, quote unquote, who is taking this data in and creating something unique, right? Because if that's the case, then you get a defense for a lot of this stuff, right? Now, that Johnny Cash voice that I heard was very close, probably too close to be somebody that really went through the filter. But I think maybe this will cause that case, which is the case of, can an AI essentially create something original based on interpreting other people's art, be forced forward, so we get an answer on that sooner than later? And if they lose that case, if the major AI companies lose that case, they are in deep doo-doo, right? Because if that case goes into law and then, say, the Supreme Court protects it, all of these companies are kind of screwed a little bit. And I think that could set the AI universe back a lot. Now, will politicians let that happen? I don't know. There's so many complicated questions going on here, but music companies you don't want to mess with. And I think in this instance, as much fun as those music generation softwares are, they're going to have some problems.
Yeah, I think it's very true that we are still at the phase of trying to figure out the broad principles that we agree upon. OpenAI has had this argument of free use for data, and that can apply to all of AI to some extent. But then you do have, beyond the free use question, also questions of generation, like if you're generating deepfakes and people's likeness, is that allowed? Things like that. And it's very much going to be still up in the air, but probably
There's
not for too
parody
much
law,
long.
right? There's all like my background is I come from like television and late night comedy, but also on the tech side doing things. Parody law is very specific, right? Like you can parody if you're making a comment on something and you have a certain amount of rights, but you can't just straight up use somebody's voice, like with the Scarlett Johansson thing. Or in fact, there was a legal precedent. Bette Midler, the famous singer Bette Midler, sued Ford in the '80s because she was asked to do a commercial for them. She said no, and they used her voice, a sound-alike voice. They got a sound-alike voice, and she won. And that's why whenever you hear a commercial with a celebrity impersonator, now they have to say celebrity personality was. What am I trying to say? Oh, sorry, celebrity. Oh, celebrity in person. Now that's why they have to say celebrity impersonated. So this is all of that same stuff kind of balled together in one.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of celebrities and the land of LA, the next story is about the Hollywood agency CAA aiming to help stars manage their own AI likeness. This is the Creative Artists Agency, apparently a leading entertainment and sports talent agency, and they developed the CAA Vault, virtual media storage systems for celebrities to store their digital assets, including AI clones. This was developed in partnership with the AI tech company Veritone, and will securely store digital doubles and will kind of make it so you can only access those by authorized users, enabling these celebrities to control and monetize these doubles. So I guess people are trying to monetize and sort of create an infrastructure for this likely future where people will have AI doubles that they can license out to commercials and stuff.
Yeah, so I used to be a CAA client. That's the world I come from, and now I'm a UTA client, which is United Talent Agency, which is a similar one. And a couple things I'll say about this because I have an insight is one, all of these agencies, the world of Hollywood is struggling right now. And I think Hollywood in general is feeling kind of under threat, not only by AI, but a number of other issues that you can get into, which about streaming wars, people not spending as much money, all sorts of other things churn. I don't know if an agency is the right person to do this, but I understand why, because what they're trying to do is pivot out into another business, another way to make money, another way to help their clients, which is it is a client-based business. So if I am an actor, say I'm The Rock, I have one of these agencies kind of like being my legal representation to the world at large and helping me do the deals that I do in the world. I think this is a big deal in the future. I just actually talked to a friend of mine a guy that I've recently met who's running a company in stealth, and their whole goal is to create a simple licensing agreement for people to do this, because the theory here is, say The Rock makes $5 million for a Dorito ad right now. Well, that kind of deal and the celebrity level that The Rock is at is probably not going to exist for much longer because it's distributing across multiple groups of people. Many, many more people are getting semi-famous. There's very few people who are like uber famous anymore. And that deal, that $5 million deal is probably going to be like $1 million or $500,000, but there might be 3 to 5 of them. So, and if there's 3 to 5 of them and say one of them is in, I don't know, India, another one is in Madagascar and one's in America, well, is there a world where The Rock could like just say to the Madagascar one, like, yeah, you can use my likeness and you can use my voice. I have approval over it, but I don't have to do anything. I just get to license it out. Yes. And that's like a great deal for The Rock because he can spread himself out more and maybe make as much as he was making originally by doing stuff in different places. So this is a big deal when it comes to the future of celebrity and licensing and all that stuff. I'm not convinced that an agency is the right place to own it, but I understand why they're doing it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and it seems like if nothing else, it's to their clients. It's probably
It's add-on. Yeah, it's valuable, right?
yeah,
Yes,
it's a
exactly.
competitive advantage. And
Exactly. Yeah.
I think it's pretty much inevitable. It seems like we've already seen examples of this being done in practice.
Yes.
And it's just going to be like in the future, it's going to be like, oh wow, they actually did this in person.
They actually really did
It's
this.
going to be a big deal.
Yeah, exactly.
And one last story for the section and for this episode, coming from the New York Times. It's what do you do when AI takes your voice? And it's about 2 voice actors who listen to a podcast about the rise of AI and the threat it posed to actors and entertainment professionals. And as they listened to this episode, they heard their own voices being generated by AI. Like, it was a little interview segment. And they didn't actually license their voice. In fact, apparently they listened to Poe, and they say it sounded just like Mr. Lerman is one of them. And apparently this was generated by a company called Lovo that they did provide some clips to without signing an agreement for voice generation. So now they're suing that company, and they are actually doing this as a class action lawsuit. So they're looking for other voice actors to also join in on that. So yeah, another example of seemingly unauthorized use of their likeness and some legal activity on this front.
I mean, again, to me, this is like early days of the internet where you had people taking content from people. You had YouTube uploading the famous Lonely Island Lazy Sunday clip. Like, it is the piracy stage of AI, and I can guarantee you this is all going to get worked out. But you're going to have companies, and I don't know a lot about Lovo, but you're going to have companies that probably made a mistake early on. And also, people don't remember this, but like, YouTube got saved by Google a little bit, right? Like, YouTube really did get saved when Google came in and bought them. And it was great for the YouTube founders. They're like, they made a crap load of money, but also they could have really been mired in deep, deep legal issues for a very long time. And a company the size of Google coming in and helping them kind of navigate through that and paying for a lot of the legal conversation was important. So I think we're just in that stage of AI content. I think we're in the move fast and break things. I did something that might have not been okay. Well, sometimes you're going to get caught, and that will maybe that company won't exist, or maybe the technology is so good, like something like Suno or Udio, you'll have somebody come in and be their backer in some form or another.
Yeah, exactly. That's totally true. This happened with YouTube. One of the reasons they sold to Google is that this copyright challenge existed, and it's for Suno and Udio in particular, but later on also video generation.
Yes.
You're going to need the safeguards for copyright, and they are going to be added. And we've seen this to some extent already with things like OpenAI, Character AI, Anthropic, getting more restrictive or more careful with their generations. And many people on Reddit and so on have complained of like, these models are getting useless because they won't allow me to do stuff that I used to do. But these are the sorts of steps that companies have to take, or at least will take, to avoid some of the fallout of their technology doing things that people don't want it to do.
That's right. Or the businesses that own the IPs letting other technologies do stuff that they don't want it to do. That's an important thing too.
Yeah. And with that, we are done with this episode of Last Week in AI. Thank you, Gavin, for co-hosting. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you so much for being here. Yeah, if you're interested in our podcast, you've probably heard us be on here before, but it's called AI for Humans. You can find it both in the Apple and Spotify podcast stores, but we also do a video podcast. Our YouTube is kind of popping off lately. We've been doing a couple videos a week in addition to the main show that comes out on Thursday mornings. But yeah, please go listen to it. And always thanks, Andre, for having me here. I love this because it's such a much deeper dive. We do we do a news chunk in our show too, but we don't spend we go through 3 to 5 stories, and I love going through and kind of getting more deep on all these specific ones.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. And we'll include a link in the description of episodes. Do check out AI for Humans. And do keep listening to this one, hopefully. And as I always say, we appreciate it if you share it with friends and give us a review, things like that. But we definitely, more than anything, enjoy knowing that people listen and benefit. So keep tuning in and enjoy the AI.
Leave a review for these guys. Leave a review for these guys. I'm going to go. I'm not even sure if I've left you a review yet. I'll go leave you one right now in case I haven't.
Okay, great. And enjoy the AI outro song that is coming after this statement.
All right. We've wrapped up a great show. Gavin shared the news and inside its AI stories. spirit